Israeli Defense Minister Ya'alon says soldiers who were attacked in Kalandia accidentally entered the camp using GPS app Waze. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov agree not to discuss the alleged violations of the Syrian ceasefire. And in the United States, 11 states across the country are set to vote on Super Tuesday within their political parties. Good afternoon and welcome back to i24News. I'm Tjong. We begin in Israel, where the IDF rescued 2 soldiers overnight from the Kalandia refugee camp north of Jerusalem. According to Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon, the soldiers accidentally went from Jerusalem to Ramallah through Kalandia using GPS app Waze. Ya'alon said of the incident, quote, "I always said that when using GPS, you also need to know how to navigate with a map." The 2 were pelted with rocks and Molotov cocktails. According to the army, additional troops entered Kalandia to control the ongoing riot and retrieve the burned vehicle. 1 Palestinian rioter was killed and dozens injured during the IDF's operation to rescue the 2 soldiers.
They entered the camp and they said that they didn't manage to go back with their vehicle because youth from the camp surrounded them, and we're talking about youngsters. And they followed them, and later they abandoned their vehicle and ran towards the east side of the camp, towards the graveyard. The Israeli soldiers came and rescued them, and we lost a martyr.
Earlier, we were joined by Emil Olen, senior defense analyst from Israel's Haaretz newspaper, with more on the reasons for the violent response to the soldiers' presence in Kalandia.
The problem was that no one knew that these 2 soldiers were entering the Kalandia camp. They probably were not aware themselves of their whereabouts. And when the border patrol tried to extricate them, a firefight ensued, a very unfortunate incident, because usually the Palestinian security forces are the ones who are extricating both civilians as well as soldiers. These incidents are rarely reported, and the Israeli authorities are usually grateful to the Palestinian security forces. However, the Palestinian residents of Kalandia naturally suspected that this was just part of an operation, which it was not, and unfortunately it caused the death of a Palestinian student. But generally, the Palestinians now resist more and more what used to be routine operations where Israelis were entering the various neighborhoods in order to arrest suspects. Usually the other residents stood by silently, but more and more they are resisting, sometimes by stoning, sometimes by firebombing, and sometimes by actual fire. And then, of course, there are casualties.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said on Monday he and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov agreed not to discuss the violations of the ceasefire deal in Syria. The focus will be to ensure any strikes will solely target jihadist groups. i24News' Shelby Weiner has more on the situation in Syria.
1,000 Syrian rebels dropped their weapons and joined the peace process on Monday. The disarmament was a result of the deal for the cessation of hostilities, a first for the Syrian civil war. But the progress does not come easy. The Saudi-backed H&C committee says the deal faces complete nullification because of violations from attacks by Syria. The international spotlight is high as Russia and the Syrian government it's supporting faces scrutiny.
I hope the U.S.-led anti-terrorist coalition will focus their attention on armed groups, instead of on how to push responsibility onto Russia and Assad government, thereby not letting them break the already reached agreement.
Russia also called out Turkey for damaging the efforts towards the Syrian peace process. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry came out saying he spoke with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on how to proceed.
We have agreed that while there have been some number of violations reported on both sides, and we take them all very seriously, we do not want to litigate these in a public fashion in the press. We want to work to eliminate them. And we have agreed on a process by which we will do that.
Instead, teams in Geneva and Amman will look into the reports as the cessation continues. The deal does not include jihadist groups, but the hope for peace talks to resume still hangs in the air.
Hundreds of refugees attempted to break through a border fence between Macedonia and Greece on Monday. Tensions are on the rise as migration has been stemmed, leaving over 7,000 people stranded. German Chancellor Angela Merkel lashed out at Austria and the Balkan states for tightening migrant entries. Meanwhile, refugee boats from Turkey continue to arrive in Greece, causing a major bottleneck. Clashes between French police and migrants erupted as authorities began to dismantle parts of the Calais refugee camp known as the Jungle. Well, Germany's highest court will begin hearing arguments today to ban a neo-Nazi fringe party more than a decade after a first attempt failed. The case will argue that the far-right National Democratic Party is a threat to the country's democratic order. Chancellor Angela Merkel's government supports the case, although it is not formally a part of the file against the party. Merkel's spokesman has repeatedly labeled the NPD an anti-democratic, xenophobic, anti-Semitic, anti-constitutional party. Critics complain the proceedings will give the NPD, a party with only about 5,200 members, a national stage. Well, Japanese companies are set to take part in Egyptian projects worth about $18 billion. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said on Monday after meeting Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Tokyo. Abe did not elaborate on the projects, but an official at Japan's foreign ministry said Japanese and Egyptian companies are scheduled to sign more than 10 agreements on Wednesday in the electricity and other sectors.
The Japan and Egyptian Economic Cooperation Committee has signed an $18 billion deal worth of projects and industries, including electric infrastructure. I welcome this as a new step toward progress in the economic relationship between our two nations.
South Korean President Park Geun-hye said today that Seoul will not end its dialogue with North Korea. She warned, however, that under the new UN sanctions, the regime in Pyongyang will be under even greater pressure if it sticks to its nuclear program.
Our government will not shut the door on dialogue, but as long as the North refuses to change, the pressure from us and the international community will continue. Japanese government should not forget mistake in its history, and it faithfully implement the spirit and our purpose of the agreement, as well as putting efforts so that it can be remembered as the lessons for future generations.
On the campaign trail now, Super Tuesday is here, and candidates are gearing up to win the presidential nominations for this year's election to the White House. 11 states across the U.S. will vote today within their political parties. Donald Trump leads the Republican side after winning the last 3 primaries. He's looking to take a decisive lead over the other leading GOP candidates, Cruz, Rubio, and Kasich. The 5th Republican candidate, Ben Carson, is not expected to last beyond today's elections.
Tonight, just hours before Super Tuesday voting begins, last-minute rallies and tension. Protesters interrupting a Donald Trump event chanting Black Lives Matter.
Get him out of here, please.
And as they left, a photographer thrown to the ground by a Secret Service agent. Trump making no mention of that or of the controversy sparked by these comments on CNN about his endorsement from former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard David Duke.
Would you just say unequivocally you condemn them and you don't want their support?
Well, I have to look at the group. I mean, I don't know what group you're talking about.
Trump later explained he didn't hear the question, noting he has disavowed Duke, but it isn't stopping the attacks from his opponents.
I don't care how bad the earpiece is, Ku Klux Klan comes through pretty clearly, and he refuses to criticize it.
We should all be united in saying that the Klan is reprehensible. And has no place in politics.
The latest national poll shows Trump supported by 49% of GOP voters going into Super Tuesday, the biggest day of the campaign so far, with voting in 12 states and more than 1,600 delegates at stake. Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton hoping to solidify her lead tomorrow, already looking beyond Bernie Sanders, now targeting Trump.
I don't think America has ever stopped being great. What we need to do now is make America whole.
That's all we have time for this news bulletin. Join us again in 20 minutes for more. Thank you for watching.